That's Jonah Keri of Grantland.com. Jonah, one of the best baseball writers in the country. Good to have you on the show again, Jonah. How you doing?
You're too kind, Bruce. I'm good. How are you?
Good. A lot to talk about. Real quickly, the Ozzie Guillen thing certainly died and has gone away, huh?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was just kind of one of those things. And Major League Baseball has a tendency to suspend people or punish people based on how big a controversy it is at that very moment. So, for instance, if Delman Young got into an altercation in Minnesota or Kansas City, he maybe doesn't get suspended at all. But because it's in the New York Post, it's a big deal. Same thing with Guillen. Maybe the Guillen thing blows over. He made comments in a magazine article 6 years ago, pretty similar to the ones that were made this time, but the media made a big deal about it, so that's why there was a hubbub. So it's a very strange kind of dog chasing your tail kind of thing. But, yeah, I mean, listen, you might not agree with the guy's comments, but it's America. You can say what you want.
Shifting gears, how do you think the Clemens trial is going, especially now that Pettit has testified? And it was interesting, they took a recess before they actually got to the meat of his testimony, that he had to admit that Clemens said to him that he did take HGH.
Yeah, you know, I don't think Pettit wants to be there, to be honest with you. It's just something where they called him, he's got to do it, and that's fine. I think that ultimately the case is just going to rest on the evidence and the prosecution's ability to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt, all that good stuff. I mean, it's going to be interesting. If it's up to me, I don't like this stuff. I'm not a big fan of going after Clemens or Bonds or any of this. Yes, perjury is a significant charge, if you get into a situation like that, particularly in the case of Bonds. But I just think in general, it's kind of a waste of taxpayer dollars and time and so forth to be worrying about cases like this, quite frankly. I don't have a dog in this race one way or the other with Clemens, but quite frankly, all this stuff kind of went away. I'd be pretty happy about it.
You know, Jonah, I would 110% agree with you if Clemens did not bring this upon himself. He's the one that requested to go on 60 Minutes. He's the one that requested that press conference, and then it turned out to be a fiasco, and he cut it short. He's the one that requested to go in front of Congress. Otherwise, I totally agree, but he brought this upon himself.
Yeah, no, those are all very fair points, absolutely. Clemens is a little bit of a unique case. I think I'm just a Bonds guy, to be honest with you, so maybe that opinion is clouding the other one. But Clemens certainly seems to take a weird approach to this kind of thing. There's no question about it.
Is Oil Can Boyd getting treatment?
Yeah, I mean, that was tough, the Boyd thing. And then I don't know if you saw Amy Nelson at SB Nation did a great piece on Willie Mays Aikens today, the old first baseman. He said every single day that he played, he was doing something. I mean, it's just, the 80s were a crazy time, man. I mean, there was just a lot of stuff that was going on. I'm writing a book about the Expos. I interviewed Tim Raines for that book. And, Raines is beloved in baseball and an absolutely outstanding citizen. But when he was 21 or 22 years old and he was playing, there was a year when he was pretty much on coke every day. It's one of those things. And I'm happy that Boyd came out of it fine, and it looks like his life is doing all right. And he's working on this book and all that. But baseball was such a weird time that I don't know. I think those kind of substances would have different effects on different players at different times. But it would be interesting to see what would happen as a decade didn't have that much recreational drugs. I mean, maybe Raines is closer to the Hall of Fame because he didn't throw away his 82 season. Maybe Boyd's a different kind of pitcher. Maybe Willie Aikens, who was a very highly touted first baseman for a while, things might have gone differently for them too. I think the main thing is, you're happy that for the most part, certainly with Boyd and Raines anyway, that their lives turned out pretty okay.
Yeah, I said to our viewers earlier when I reported on the Boyd story, he could have been a lot better. He had good stuff. He had a lot of.
He did have good stuff.
He had very good stuff. Let's talk baseball. I came on the air today and expressed what I called borderline. I'm borderline seriously concerned about Jimenez. When you go from 97 to 98 to 91 to 92, and even Beckham last night hit a home run on a low outside fastball clocked at 91 and pulled it over the left field wall.
Yeah, and he's walking 7 or 8 batters per 9 innings. I mean, there are a lot of bad things going on with Ubaldo. I'm trying to pull up this article that I just read about him as I'm talking to you. His swinging strike rate, which is exactly what it sounds like, it just basically looks at what percentage of the time does a guy swing and miss. League average, is something like 8, 9, 10%. The better pitchers might be over 10, that kind of thing. Ubaldo, here, I've got it right here. 2009, 9.6% of the time he got swinging strikes. 2010, 9.1, 7.5. 4.9 this year. Nobody is fooled by what he's throwing. They're not committing to the pitches that he's throwing. They're just letting them go by, and they're either walking or they're hitting the ball for extra bases. This is a serious problem, and I don't want to say that the Indians got snookered. I think we're still a little early here. But you sort of go back in time and you say, well, why did the Colorado Rockies do this exactly? Jimenez definitely was known to be a bit of a pain in the butt, and he would complain about things, and he wanted his contract renegotiated. And all those things are true. But, gosh, there have been pains in the butts for as long as there's been sports. That's always existed. If the guy can perform, you tend to keep him on your team. It is curious that, this was the Aces staff. It's not like the Rockies are loaded with starting pitching, quite the opposite. And yet they said, yeah, we're good. We're going to trade him for Pomerantz and some other stuff. It kind of makes you wonder a little bit.
Yeah, maybe Dan O'Dowd knew something. Is Peavy for real in our division?
Well, yeah, here's the thing about Peavy, Bruce. I mean, he's always been a good pitcher. He just could never stay healthy. That was the thing. And I think that's why you got to hand it to Kenny Williams. I mean, that guy, he's a gambler. He's the biggest gambler in baseball. He picked up Alex Rios, $60 million worth of Alex Rios when the Jays released him. Goes out and spends 56 for Dunn, even though Dunn is, at the time he was certainly a very good hitter, but he was a one-dimensional player. And there's just been some, what you could say, quite frankly, were bust moves. And the Peavy one looked like it might be one, too, where there was a lot of upside because of what he did in San Diego, but also a lot of injury risk. And the injuries persisted with Chicago. And this is really the first time that we're seeing right out of the box in the American League he's performing the way he is. He's leading the league in everything, pretty much. Wins above replacement, and strikeout to walk ratio is terrific, and ERA is right there, and he's just been phenomenal. So it doesn't surprise me that much. The only thing I'll say is he's not throwing as hard as he used to, which is natural with pitchers, but he's really locating, and he specifically, I've actually watched quite a bit of him. He's throwing fastballs inside on left-handed hitters. He's challenging them, curiously, even though he's throwing 91 now instead of 93 or 94. Seems like he's becoming a little bit more of an aggressive pitcher, and he was already very good. So I think it does bode well for them, and it's funny about the White Sox. I guess for years they've been known for their hitting, but they really do have good pitching this year. They have a deep bullpen, and they have a lot of starters. I mean, if the Tigers are going to keep playing like crap all year, it becomes a very interesting division because the Indians are pretty good, and the White Sox are pretty good. And if you're going to get to 85 or 86 wins, becomes interesting. Now we're up for grabs.
How do you explain Pujols? I know. There is no explanation.
Yeah, and I've written about him already this year at Grantland. Not specifically an Atlanta article just about Pujols, but I've written kind of blurbs about him. This stuff happens. I mean, if this happened in June or whatever, it would be notable, it would be scary, but it wouldn't be quite to this extent. It's this whole drought thing. It's that he has 0 for the year because we're at the start of the season. So I think that a little bit of it is just the attention that's being paid on what's going on right now. And then I think a little bit of it is adjusting to new pitchers. I think you have to factor that in, is the American League. And I just consider the American League to be a superior league to national in pretty much every way. So I think that's another thing. And I think beyond that, it's just one of those things. It's random variance or whatever you want to say, where sometimes stuff just happens. And, you start to struggle and maybe it gets in your head. And Pujols never struggles, right? So if it keeps going, he might start to be more aggressive with swinging. I mean, he's striking out more than he ever has, and he's walking less than he ever has. That tells me this is a guy that isn't seeing the ball well, number one, and number two is saying, oh, gosh, I got to do something at this point. I'm going to open up my swing and try to hit it out of the ballpark, and that's only making matters worse. I mean, the whole cliche is you let the game come to you. Doesn't seem like that's what he's doing. But, I mean, look, Torrey Hunter, his teammate, had no home runs a week ago. He was also on a drought, and Torrey Hunter's not Pujols, but he's a very good player. He's got 4 since then. These things just go in fits and starts, and I think if you have me back on the air in 3 or 4 weeks, we'll say, well, Pujols, they had a pretty good May, 6, 7 home runs and a bunch of RBI, and look, the Angels aren't as bad as we thought they were.
He better start catching on for that kind of cash. Are you believing in Baltimore yet?
I wouldn't say that I'm believing in them. They're in a situation right now where they're playing 15 games in a row against very tough teams. I might miss one of them, but I think it's something like Yankees, Red Sox, Tigers, Rangers, and either Rays or Jays. Basically all the toughest teams in the league. And before that, they were playing some pretty weak teams. They just kind of rolled over some of the easier opponents in the American League. Now, having said that, there are some good signs. First of all, I really like what I'm seeing from Jason Hamill. He's throwing a great sinker ball, which is very interesting because he was in Colorado.
I saw him against the Yanks the other night. He looked really good.
Really good. And if there's one place on earth, Bruce, where you want to throw a sinker, goodness, isn't it where I'm talking to you from right now in the great state of Colorado? Yeah. That's the place to do it. But he didn't throw a sinker, goes to Baltimore, starts throwing it, and looks really good with that. So that's a good sign. Pitch well against the freaking Yankees. That's a little different story than the A's or the Mariners, and makes you wonder if it might be sustainable. Adam Jones, I like some things that I'm seeing from him. Even Chris Davis is doing well. Pedro Strop was the guy they picked up from the Rangers. They have like 3 or 4 Rangers cast-offs on that team who've been pretty good. So I think it's just one of those things where they spec on kind of buy low players, and some of them have worked out. I still think it's a loaded division. I still think they probably finish last, but maybe they come close to 500. You could see a scenario where maybe all 5 teams in the AL East finish over 500, which would be absolutely remarkable given how tough each of them is and how easy it is for one of them to beat up on the other.
Let me ask you the same question about the Washington Nationals.
I would have felt better about the Nationals a week or 2 ago, but I think a Ryan Zimmerman injury, and he might be back by Sunday, but I have my doubts about Zimmerman. This is a very fragile player. He's had injuries in the past. And now go look at that lineup. Just look at it right now. You can say the starting rotation is phenomenal. They had the lowest April ERA, that rotation, of any team since I think it was something like the 1978 Oakland A's. And it was the lowest in the National League since something like the 75 Brewers. I mean, it was unbelievable how well all of them pitched. Strasburg is amazing. Gio Gonzalez has been pretty good in the easier league. All that's great. But they cannot hit. I mean, to me, I look at the Nationals, they're almost exactly like the Phillies, right? I mean, they've got a bunch of aces, and, they're really good from that level, but they just don't have hitting. And Mike Morse is supposed to come back eventually. Ryan Zimmerman is supposed to come back eventually. But I'll sort of believe it when I'll see it. I think this is a terrible offense with a great starting rotation. What that gives you, maybe it gives you the NL East because there's no dominant teams in there, but I don't think this is a great club by any means.
Yeah, you spoke of players Morris coming back. What do you hear on Utley and Howard with Philadelphia?
Yeah, Howard started baseball activities down in Florida, so that's a good sign. Gosh, they need him back. I mean, it's just, he's a little bit of an overrated player, I'm not going to lie. When he puts up all these RBI numbers, a lot of it is because Rollins and Utley get on base in front of him. I don't think he's at the level of some of the elite, the Adrian Gonzalez's and the Prince Fielders and the Lake Joey Vottos. I don't think he's that good, but he's pretty good, and they need him. Utley's a mystery because this knee injury has been going on for a while. He had the same problem last year and missed a bunch of time, and old Utley, I would have said, is the most valuable player on that team and maybe the second most valuable player in the league behind, at the time, Pujols. Very underrated player and phenomenal career, but I just wonder if we might be getting down to the point where he's going to become a liability on defense because his mobility is limited and he won't be able to run as well. And, I mean, I'm not an expert on knees, but it's possible that he's not going to hit the way he did it before either. So they'll help that team when they eventually do come back, but I don't think you can expect, vintage 2007 Howard and Utley at this point. I think that they're getting older and they're injured. I mean, there's no way around it.
Can Kemp and Kershaw carry the Dodgers all season?
Yes, they can. And, in fact, right as you called me, an article that I wrote on Matt Kemp just went up at Grantland.com. I interviewed Kemp yesterday at Coors Field. We talked at length. I did a whole a closer look statistically at it. I talked to Don Mattingly. I talked to Tim Wally. So lots to read about with Kemp. I encourage people to check that out. Again, you look at that division. I look at the entire National League. Tell me a team that scares the hell out of you, Bruce. There just aren't any. And so whatever you might think about the Nationals and their weaknesses, whatever you might think about the Dodgers, and I think they're a top-heavy club with Kemp and Kershaw and Andre Ethier and maybe one or two other guys, but a lot of bums as well. But, yeah, that might be enough. Maybe 85, 86, 87, like we said, is going to get it done. There are certain divisions. If you want to win the AL West and beat the Rangers, you got to come up with, 97 wins. If you want to win the AL East and beat all those great teams, you're going to have to come up with 94, 95, or 96. But if you want to win the NL West, yeah, we're talking 80-something. And
right.
Arizona we're waiting to see. Colorado's got weaknesses. The Giants can pitch, but they don't hit all that well. There are just all these kind of flawed teams in that division. Yeah. So maybe this hot start, if they just play 500 ball for the rest of the year, they win 86 or 87 games. Could be enough.
Yeah, great point, Jonah. It was just a few years ago. San Diego won that division. What were they? A couple of games above 500, I think.
That's correct. Not much has changed except that San Diego's worse now.
Jonah Keri of Grantland.com. Check him out. Jonah, always a pleasure. Talk to you later.
Thank you, Bruce.